The last 2,000 years, the New Testament era, now the era of the growth of Jesus' church, has been an era with a lot of preachers. A lot of preachers delivering God's word. There have been true and genuine preachers who've been very faithful in taking the Bible and presenting God's truth, faithful messengers of God. Of course, there have also been the counterfeits, and Jesus himself warned in Matthew 24 about false prophets. And in 1 John, we read about this kind of thing. So there were many antichrists had arrived on the scene. So this is what we find. We find the true and the counterfeit. Now, if we just limit ourselves right now to the true, the preaching ministry in the New Testament era really started with John the Baptist. He was the first preacher. And how dynamic was he and how effective was he? But he was preparing the way, wasn't he? So he was then overshadowed by Jesus, the greatest preacher of all time. And then Jesus passed the mantle on to the apostles. How important is prayer in preaching ministry? If we look at Jesus, the apostles, and right through to today, and we look at church history and testimonies that have been given and examples that have been set, how important has prayer been? Well, the apostles famously said in Acts chapter 6 that we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. They were the two things they really gave priority to. They prayed much, they preached much, but they dared not do a lot of preaching devoid of prayer. So we need this. We need prayer. Now, John Sung was mightily used of God, and he's well known as a highly effective preacher and evangelist, and his life is recorded in several biographies. This short one by William Schubert is something special because he knew John Sung. And so I want to give William Schubert the opportunity to speak. This was written decades ago. And this is what he says. He says, why did John Sung's ministry have such lasting results? Now, that's a question that should always be asked. Now, obviously, a preacher can sort of breeze through town and everyone gets excited, then the dust settles and people and churches just go back to how they were before. So what's the secret of someone having a ministry that lasts over the course of time? Well, let William Schubert testify. He says that John Sung was different from all others I've ever known in his prayer life. In Nanking, we were in adjoining rooms, and I heard him pray. He had hundreds of prayer requests, even thousands, on prayer blanks. So what people would do is they would take these prayer blanks, and William Schubert says that they cost 1 copper each, and they would write on these prayer blanks their name, details such as their name, address, their age, prayer requests importantly, and a testimony. And so what John Sung would do is he would take these little testimonies and little bits of information on these prayer blanks that people filled in, and he would carry them with him. And William Schubert said that he had thousands. John Sung kept thousands of these little prayer records of people in 2 big suitcases, and he would pray fervently for these people. What a great ministry that is. Not just a ministry of prayer, but a ministry of care. Because if we care enough, we'll pray. And John Sung clearly cared about these people and he prayed for them. And William Schubert makes the comment, in Nanking, I heard him weeping and groaning in agony of soul, praying for these people. So John Sung just took these people onto his heart and prayed for them even after he'd moved on. And William Schubert goes on to say that that is one secret of his success and one of the lasting results of his ministry, that he prayed for the seekers after he left them. So that's so important that John Sung is linking intercessory prayer with preaching. Now, what was the effect of that? Did it help in having longer lasting fruit? It certainly did. And let's just hear William Schubert's testimony again. Wherever John Sung had been, there were Christians who remained true and faithful. Wherever I've been in China, and he mentions Taiwan as well, he says the most faithful and dependable members in the churches were those who had been saved and blessed in Dr. Sung's meetings. Others have said the same. This is because he prayed for them afterward. Not long ago, I talked to a pastor from Indonesia who has a thriving church during this great revival time there, and he said that the 40 strongest members and best soul winners of his church in Indonesia were the product of John Sung's ministry. So that's a great testimony to long-lasting fruit due to not just preaching the word, but combining that with intercessory prayer. May God encourage us, and anyone watching this whom God has called to preaching, evangelistic or pastoral ministry, to make sure we are backing our proclamation of the word with much prayer, it makes a difference. It really does.